Bible says in Zechariah 4:10, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." Let's start the work.
There it is.
My name is Eric. This is the Preacher in the Hat, and we're going to get into a little bit of what that means, but I have a couple of people here with me that we're going to roll through this with. So, like I said, my name is Eric. Across from me is... I promise it's not a mirror image, but it is kind of a mirror image.
Yeah.
As one of our co-hosts, and that's Derek. So, Derek, give us a...
Yeah. Glad to be here.
All right. And then the man, the myth... Nope, not the myth. Just the man, the legend himself, our dad.
A little bit of myth, man.
Who is to my right is Steve, and he's here with us. And we're the Preacher in the Hat team. So
there we go.
We got a man behind a man with a plan behind the scenes here. You'll hopefully get to know him as we go through some of this stuff as well. But one of the things that I wanted to kick off with is just kind of talking about a little bit about how we ended up here.
Yeah.
And so because that's the big question, right? It's okay. So, Dad, tell us a little bit about how we got to sitting in this moment, and what are some of the pieces that led to that.
Have to kind of go back over it in my mind because it wasn't a strategy like, okay, here we're going to go and we're going to start. In fact, for me, it wasn't necessarily even, hey, this is the beginning. But as I look back on it, I never really thought about a podcast or sitting down and having this kind of conversation very much. Wasn't anything I really aspired to or anything until had a conversation with you, Eric, one day that you talked about some of that. And then I had the opportunity to go to Mississippi to a friend of mine who was doing a podcast and sat in there with him. And I went, I think I want to do this. And all the way home, the 2-hour drive home on a Thursday evening several months ago, I went, I think that's something I really want to do. And it was a small beginning thought in my head. And here we go.
And talk real quick, because this is something that you had mentioned about something that folks have talked to you about in the past.
Oh, yeah.
That you would, and you were like, no, I think I'd rather do this.
Yeah. I mean, some people tried to crank a small beginning in my head to say, why don't you write a book? Okay. So it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I mean, some people close, near and dear to me, people that, heard things I said. Well, you're going to write a book. You ought to write a book. Not going to do it. So I thought, I like verbal stuff. I enjoy verbal stuff. I enjoy cataloging stuff verbally. Mm-hmm. And so why not do a podcast? Because that might help me. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a book.
This is the book.
This is the Preacher in the Hat book.
And I'll say, you didn't really give much context to the timeline there, but all of that was not that long ago.
Really
we
wasn't.
went from 0 to 60 pretty fast. So a lot of that is thanks to Chris, who's working behind the scenes for us. But this was not there. We've put the work in, but it was not that long ago.
So it's not just something that we've been mulling over about doing. You're right. Yeah. And I remember years ago when I was a kid, the big thing was how fast could a car go? How many seconds did it take from a car to go from 0 to 60? That was a big deal when I was a kid growing up. I'd say we had to hammer I think we had that sucker to the floor. I mean, really, it seemed to me that we have, and much faster than a lot of things I do. So small beginning, great acceleration.
Yeah.
Yeah,
quickly.
You put four perfectionists in a room.
Right.
It would have been up even faster. If that wasn't the case.
Yeah, right.
That's true.
That's true. Right. Yeah. Maybe maybe not quite as good, but definitely quicker. Yeah. So we'll get, over time we'll get into a lot of things about ministry experiences between the three of us, and and all that kind of stuff, and including our relationship just as father and sons, and for those of you who don't know, Derek and I are twins, and that's a whole other source of material that we'll dive into and stuff. But we wanted to stick on the small beginnings idea because that verse out of Zechariah, of course Derek and I have heard you preach I don't know how many sermons on on this, and it's not just a cool verse idea for the start of a podcast. It's way more deeply ingrained into all of our lives than just that. And so I want to go back to let's figure out, let's go through some of what small beginnings have been like in your life. So take us back. We kind of talked about this before, of course, when we were planning, and we want to start at your baptism.
Yeah. Great place to start, I think. First of all, because it was small. Under a bridge in South Georgia. Back then, we had a creek called Spring Creek. It's where we went down of a church of all, the number was 30 to 40 people. I mean, like when we really had a big Sunday, we might have had 40 people, all right? So my uncle was the pastor. I had come to faith in Christ. I was passionate about it. And I was excited about an opportunity to be baptized. So one Sunday afternoon, we're down underneath a bridge. Cars, bloom, 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 bloom. US 27 in Colquitt, Georgia.
Plug that into your Google Maps.
I was going to say shout out.
Shout out to Colquitt, Miller County High. Pirates, by the way, in case you didn't know. But anyhow, there we were, boom, 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 and we're underneath the bridge. And there's a man there who was an honorary grandfather of mine, kind of an interesting story, who happened to be there when I was going to do the baptism, and he indeed helped with the baptism. His last name was Souter, and I called him Grandpa Souter. Not because my uncle wasn't there or couldn't do that as a pastor, but he participated in it because he would come and visit our family sometimes. So there I was underneath a bridge with a few small number of people in that little small church, including my immediate family and mom and dad, my sister, and my brothers, both of them, because Lynn, my youngest brother, was probably 6 months to a year old when this happened, okay? So I'm 10, and we're underneath the bridge, and I remember it. And then 50 years later, I'm back, and I revisit that spot, and my wife, unbeknownst to me, took a picture of me standing at that very spot. The crazy thing about it is in that small country town, in that small little Spring Creek, and everybody who's from there knows Spring Creek, it still looks the same. Mm-hmm. That's what's crazy about this. It looks the same. And so there I'm standing at this, and so it's not hard to reimagine that event 50 years later. And it was in that moment that I heard that verse again that said, despise not the day of small beginnings. It was quite emotional for me, actually, because it's 50 years of walking with God, but not only 50 years of walking with God, but also helping other people walk with God and participating in their baptisms. Don't despise the day of small beginnings. That baptism was a small beginning in a small town with a small church with a little boy, and there it was in that small beginning, and I don't despise it at all. Mm-hmm. I relish it.
Yeah. And so I wanted to now draw the line, and so this is really difficult to do because I want to try to make sure don't keep it too broad, because when you talk about Dad's ministry, that's a huge, just a massive.
We're gonna have multiple episodes,
right? Yes, right.
Touch on one or two others.
Yeah. It's just a massive map of things. So talk about that small beginning underneath that bridge. Yeah. How does that lead to working with a man named J.D. Landis and building a group of churches, dozens of churches now across the entire globe? How does that start small?
It's crazy because when I think about it, I've really come to understand that almost everything is a small beginning. And when you understand that, that's why you don't despise it, is because you realize that really is a basic principle of life. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, I mean, even from the womb, even from conception, there's this. And so when you talk about it on a ministry perspective, I'm thinking, yeah, how do we go from a small town or a small place? How do we go to what we're doing now? And frankly, the beginning of that group of churches was a small beginning as well. Some years later, in the year 2000. So, I was, what, in the year 2000? Hey, I'm in my 40s already. When this kind of germinated and began and was conceived and kind of moved forward. So the thing about it that I've gotten excited about, and I told you all this off camera, is I'm getting excited about thinking about, man, life is made up of small beginnings. That's why I love that we're talking about this on the front end because, the podcast might be a small beginning, but boy, that ain't the first one. Because there's a whole series of them going back.
And I think that's one of the things that draws so many churches to what we were talking about. This group of churches called Good News Fellowship. Yeah. I think that's what draws so many of those, churches in India, and places all over the place, that draw them to Good News Fellowship is because Good News Fellowship is grateful for whatever those churches are at, whatever step of the journey those churches are in, including their small beginnings.
So let's go current day. Just what you said. You mentioned the churches in India. Today I went down in central Alabama and picked up the lead pastor of the churches in India. You know how those churches started? With a bicycle and a bell. They would ride into a very poor town, a real small tribal town. Some of them tribal, some of them not. And he was just we were talking about it again just today as we speak. And I'm going boom, 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 ding, 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 ding. And they would pull in with a bell and it would draw a crowd of people. They were like, what's going on? And they would get up and start preaching there. And then on a porch, in the middle of a street, on a little corner, whatever it was, these churches started developing. And so it is exciting to see that even though it's grown globally in some ways, what's happening is it's still made up of a lot of these small beginnings. And like you're saying, small churches, small ministries that are excited about joining it.
And I think there's a lot of strength in that type of diversity when you have different, in this case, churches, okay, at different stages of that journey. You have maybe some that have been walking it for a longer time who can, teach off of their experience, but then it's also great to have those who are just getting started almost as energy and as a reminder of those, it's like quote unquote experienced Christians should not just be with people who have followed Christ for as long as they have, right? I mean, there's strength in that diversity, and that's a really cool thing that I see having been a part of that fellowship. So and I think that's
right. And what can the American church learn about getting on a bicycle and ringing a bell and calling everybody in for church? It's a lot of times we make that sort of thing harder than it has to be, or almost like that's too small. You can't start that way. It's like we can't accept something being that simple,
or even just how it's. You're like, oh well, that's not really how it's done. That's not really how you start a church, right? It's because we had you almost get these formulas in your mind, but that again, like what I'm saying, when you have that diversity in the way that all of these and at the different phases these churches are in, you get
What's
a little
so cool
bit of
about
everything.
The principle of that is the creativity that comes out of it.
Yes, yeah.
The creativity, when you think small beginnings, creativity is endless. If you start thinking about it has to be a formula, the creativity shrinks.
Oh yeah.
And so you think, and that's just true in life. So let me go draw another line. So let's talk about families for just a minute. So I was just thinking as you were talking, Derek, is one of the things I love is watching you start your little family. It's so cool for me because I get excited about that small beginning. You know what I'm saying? Now, as a father and a grandfather, you know, I'm on the other end of it. It's bigger. You know, you got 12 grandchildren and, you know, 4 children. So I'm on that end of it. But I love going back, and you talked about how it's fun to look back, and it also is inspiring, because what it reminds me of when I see you guys being parents, being dads, and how much you love doing it, I go, boom, that was me. Mm-hmm. That was me. And so it's refreshing for me. It keeps me young in my head to go back through your experiences, to go back and say, whoa, I had that same small beginning. I loved watching you guys. I loved watching you and your sisters, you know, when y'all were little. And so now I see the grandchildren, I'm thinking, oh man, this is like, I'm going back to that small beginning. I love it. It's really exciting.
Yeah,
really
that's awesome. I love too what you said, just to, you know, about family. And I think about, you know, we started off kind of, you know, talking about, you know, your baptism, just kind of like, you know, in that little creek and under the road. And, and I think about, you mentioned small beginnings with a family, and one of the small beginnings that's so cool. When I think of, I have an almost 3-year-old boy. We have 2 kids, and
almost 4-year-old.
I'm sorry, almost 4-year-old boy. He is 3. He is 3.
That's right.
And you know, and Derek and his wife have 2 kids about the same ages as ours, and just to see a 3-year-old, you kind of start thinking about him walking towards that, you know, that moment, you know, that you experienced on the bridge, and just like seeing some of like the budding parts of that faith. And it's almost like it's really just so rooted in thankfulness, you know, for a 3-year-old, and to see that kind of growing, and it's really interesting. And Derek, you can probably, you know, kind of echo this same thing when I listen to a 3-year-old pray. You know, he's not coming to the Lord with, you know, the stuff he's got going on, the situations, you know, all that kind of stuff. Right. It's thank you for my dad. Thank you for my mom. Thank you for my sister. Thank you for my best friend. Thank you for, you know, it's just thank you. And it just struck in me, you know, when you're talking about that, to just kind of see him building towards that, you know, that same moment. You know, under that bridge.
It's so people oriented too.
Yeah,
you know, because I always ask my son before, you know, on the nights that I get to tuck him in and say, like, you know, what I always say, what are we praying for?
Yeah,
tonight?
right.
And he answers with who we are praying for tonight. You know, and it's always, again, those people that he's thankful for. You made the list last night, Eric. So. Right. But you know, like, but it's just so cool to see. But you see like the foundation and what it all should be built on.
So let's see about what the Creator did there, Derek. Is he told us, be like a child.
Right.
What does he say? Go back to the small beginning. Yeah. Go back to the small beginning, and then you'll be thankful, then you'll be grateful, then you'll be, you know. And I love what you said. We're talking about what, he's talking about who.
Yeah.
And small beginnings are often about who.
Oh, yeah.
They're very seldom about what.
Mm-hmm.
They're mostly about who.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember so much the what of the baptism as I remember who was there. My grandpa Souter, honorary grandpa, my mom and dad, my brother, my sister, my Uncle David, my Aunt Alice, my cousins, some of them who lived there.
Yeah. And I think back to the day that I got baptized, and it's kind of, you know, the same thing. And, you know, Derek and I were able to do it together on the same day. We don't have quite as cool of a, you know, we couldn't set the scene, you know, because we're out in a concrete parking lot with like this big tub out there.
That's right. I remember.
With Interstate 65 buzzing by about 200 feet away.
Yeah.
You know, so not quite as cool, but
not quite as country.
That's true. That? Not quite as country. Yeah, probably equally cold water. You know, no, I don't think we didn't have hot water at the church back then.
Probably not.
So
So let's draw a line now when we talk about who. So when I went to Israel in 2010, one of the things I got to do was to be baptized in the Jordan River. Now, some of you talk about, why would you get baptized again? Well, okay. Well, that's another argument for another day. Yeah. But I did. And I'm out there in getting baptized in the Jordan River and sitting up in the stands.
I love how they have stands.
The stand, yes, I know. That's
like you said, the stands.
Oh, listen, they had stands. They had
if
pictures.
You just jumped in at that point, you're like, what are we talking about? Like, we're about to cut to baptism.
The interesting thing about that baptism was they also would rent you a robe, a white robe, nonetheless. But somehow
that'll be
or other, some of us
$14.95.
Jumped in. Yeah, I don't remember the cost, but it was not a small beginning on the cost, believe me. So, but somehow we got in there before we got the right robes, right? Okay, so we're in the water. And I'm baptized, and it was a terrific experience. I could talk more about it again. It was just, I don't know. There were so many things. It like just solidified again so many things for me, and affirmed things. It wasn't a new thing, but it was an affirming of things that had happened in my life and so forth. And so I get out of the water, and who's standing in the stands but that legendary football coach from Florida State University, Bobby Bowden, his son Tommy Bowden, his wife Ann Bowden. Now, I didn't know these people personally. Some of the people I was with knew Bobby from his years living in Birmingham, Alabama. Right. So he knew their mamas and daddies. He knew all this. Mm-hmm. But here's my story, and I'm sticking to it, is Bobby Bowden flew all the way to Israel to watch me be baptized. Hey, what can I say?
He did.
You know what I'm saying?
Don't know if that was the plan.
He was there. He was there. I can vouch for it. I got witnesses. Hello? Now, interestingly, what do I remember? I remember the experience. I remember being in the water, but I remember the guy that baptized me. I remember that Bobby Bowden and company. I remember the people that were there once again in that baptism once again, even though the trappings were completely different and pretty cool in that I was baptized in the same river as Jesus. Okay. But I remember who. Hey, I like that we've landed on this a little bit. Small beginnings are about who as much as they are about what.
Absolutely. I think you could tie that into this room.
That's right.
Because we had some preliminary discussions about getting rolling on something like this and some things I had been thinking about. But then I kind of picked up the phone, talked to Derek about it, and I would say I don't want to speak for you, but would say that it kind of mattered, that it was Dad and I jumping in on this.
If you think about it, I think we've even talked about this before, when even in some of our planning stuff, is all of my life, probably a lot of your lives, has been. And in particularly in our connections with ministry, it's been a lot of, hey, I've got this cool idea, and everybody, and the two of you, or whatever, have been like, yeah, that's cool, let's roll with that. And it's always, and it's never something to be like, okay, yeah, you take care of it, or that, yeah, that's something that you could do. I feel like it's always been at least in some capacity, participation among us for these different things. And so, when you're talking about, oh yeah, I was talking to Dad about a podcast. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, I want to know about this.
Yeah.
What got the wheels turning? And then it's something where you're just like, I mean, yeah, you're like, Eric, I think you were asking me something about like what kind of participation level, and I was like, I mean, I'm there. Like, I don't know what, and none of us really knew what, go back X number of weeks ago when we were kind of picking this up, what it was going to turn into, or even really.
Well, that's what accelerated
it. But it didn't. But I didn't care.
Yeah.
Right. And that's part of it is like, I mean, yeah, I'm going to be a part of that, whatever it ends up looking like. Or even if we get 4 weeks down the road and we're like, that's not going to work. But because when people invest in you like that, then you turn around and you want to invest in them like that. And I'm not saying it's always like, whatever, chicken or the egg, which one comes first. That's not what the point that I'm making. It's just like, But when people have invested in you, you're like, I'm gonna invest. I want to invest.
And I
in
think
them.
I think that's such a good that really closes what you just said there, like really closes that loop really well. And that those people, the people that you kept mentioning, Grandpa Souter and your uncle and all that, they invested in that moment, and and that led to you eventually, of course, investing in us as your sons, and investing in Good News Fellowship with with a man named J.D. Landis, and then and just all of this all over everywhere, and Good News Fellowship. Without Good News Fellowship, you're not over in Mississippi with Ruskin Clay on shout out to the Remnant Thoughts podcast.
Absolutely.
That's one of the reasons why we're here today.
That's right.
It's just all that stuff, and investment after investment after investment. And each one of those investments at the time probably felt small and and minuscule, maybe not minuscule, but but at least little. And I'm sure your uncle and Grandpa Souter, I'm sure they baptized many people along the way, and not that they considered you just another of those number, but but even still, it was just, it's like, well, yeah, of course we do this, and it's like, and no idea what it led to. And if you're not under that bridge, at 10 years old, are we sitting here today?
Two things that I would add to that. One is that I would never have been under that bridge unless my dad,
that's right,
who died November the 11th this year, who we had the honor of doing his funeral. When he said something he had lived all his life that I remember, but as for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord. Without that small beginning in his family and in his home, then we would not have had our small beginnings, and I would not have been under that bridge. I would not have been under that bridge being baptized. And that's the cool thing. My dad was never a pastor. He was never a preacher. He was always a godly man in that he came to Christ at age 16, and he lived faithfully until he was 88 years old. But when I see that too is a small beginning, that impacts me way beyond even just that 10-year-old experience, because I remember it. I remember my mom talking to me when I was 3 or 4, and I really wanted to express my commitment to follow Jesus the rest of my life. And she said to me when I was 3 or 4 on the way home from a church service, she said, Steve, when you get older, you'll understand this more, but God heard you, and it's cool. I was 4 years old when that happened. And she said, as you get older, she said, you'll want to make that public. My mama, to my knowledge, had never led anybody to Jesus herself. She was not known as an evangelist. She was not the church lady, okay? She was not that person. But she talked to me about that. That small beginning, too, was fleshed out in that 10-year-old experience of baptism where my honorary grandpa, and my uncle baptized me. But you can just keep going back. The cool thing about small beginnings is you can usually just keep going back to another one. And finally, I'll finish my part of this is by saying this. Let's go humorous for a minute. All of a sudden, we're talking about who? And I'm thinking about the Grinch. Remember?
Context.
Let's go context.
I'm going to need context.
Okay, let's go context. What was the name of the people of the town? Whoville.
Welcome to Whoville.
Welcome to Whoville. Hey, what can I say? I just got to let you. The reason I brought that up is you're going to see that twisted, kind of quirky sense of humor in me some more. And all of a sudden we're thinking about something really serious, and I'm thinking about the Grinch and the problem he had with Whoville. So if you're having a problem with our Whoville here, join the Grinch. Hey, hello, I'm done. I'm out. I'm Steve. I'm the preacher in the hat. Finish us up. Sorry to.
It was a pretty lonely mountain, by the way, up above Whoville. I don't recommend it.
That's right. Don't. In other words, don't be the Grinch.
Yeah. Right.
Join Whoville.
Yeah. So join Whoville.
Didn't see that coming, did we?
No. But but like I said, I'm just so grateful for where all of those little steps, all of those little investments.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's just amazing, to be able to kind of piece all of those things together and see, where it's come from, and what all that it's led to. Yeah. It's just been, it's been an awesome ride.
It sure has. I'm glad I'm not done with it yet either.
Yeah. Another part of the ride. That's right. More to go. Well, I do just want to echo your thank you to our granddad who passed away a couple weeks ago. And like you said, if it had not been for that, for the stand he took when he was 16 years old, we might not be sitting here today.
That's right.
So thank you, Grandpa Longenecker. Your house still serves the Lord. For Derek and Steve, Chris, our man with the plan behind the cameras, my name's Eric. This has been The Preacher in the Hat, and we'll catch you next time.